So we're back, and we're going to take a look at our next task, 14.2, device mobility, movement between sites and between countries. So we're told to provision Jack's phone to be able to pick up and move his phone to the branch 2 site, and to ensure that when he arrives and attaches his phone to the branch 2 subnet, that he takes on some of the characteristics of the branch 2 device pool, phone device pool, called DP branch 2 phones. Again, for the recording, the corporate headquarters subnet hasn't changed, but the branch 2 subnet will be 177.3.11.0/24. And for your self-study, we'll create it as 192.168.10.170/32. Let's go ahead and we will create this new device mobility info. Copy one of these. Copy the branch 1, we'll call it branch 2, with the second octet being .3/24, and we'll associate it with the branch 2 phones device pool. And then we'll copy this one to call it self-study. Change the subnet mask first to 192.168.10.170. Good, branch 2 phones. Go back out and we should have 3 of these now, or 3 sets, I should say. And we're going to need to add a new device mobility group called DMG_Netherlands, because that's where the branch 2 site is. It doesn't really matter what we call it. It just needs to be that we have 2 device mobility groups. And we'll need to add, of course, a new physical location. So we'll copy this one and call it PL branch 2. Back to find list. So now we've got 3 physical locations as well. So all we need to do is go to the device pool for branch 2 phones and modify the physical location to be PL branch 2 and the device mobility group to be the Netherlands. Now notice that we have all of this populated. The device mobility calling search space and calling party transformation CSS most specifically set to branch 2 PSTN and branch 2 phones respectively, so that we see that it does not take on these characteristics because it's moving between device mobility groups or between countries, really. Don't want to take on a new calling search space because that would mean taking on new PSTN dialing necessities. You know, we would have to dial in a different fashion. So we're going to go ahead and reset or restart. Actually, there's really no reason that we need to restart this device this device pool. That's going to restart my 2 branch 2 phones. But the only thing that's really going to need to take these 2 settings that we just changed, the physical location and device mobility group, is going to be the corporate headquarter phone, still at branch 1, 177.2.11 subnet. So at this point, while we read the rest of the task, we can probably figure out what it means, or is going to say already, from the last task, or at least most of it. I'm going to go ahead and, without making you watch, disconnect Desmond Hume branch 2 phone 1 and connect the corporate headquarter phone 1 over to the branch 2 subnet. I'm going to reconnect the branch 1 phone that we had taken off. So 3001, branch 2 phone 1 will be disconnected, and in its place will be corporate headquarter phone 1 as a visiting phone. Okay, so if we take a look right now, we see that branch 1 phone 1 is off. It still says corporate headquarter phone 1 is registered, but it's not. If we click on that IP, it'll go anywhere. It's in the process of powering up right now. It just hasn't exceeded its hello timer. So CUCM doesn't know that it's dead. There we go. So it was at 177.2.11.54. It's unregistered. Let's go back and take a look at what the rest of our task tells us. Ensure that while Jack's corporate headquarter phone 1 is visiting, that all of these following work properly. Class of restriction remains the same, needs to work. Proper date and time, which is going to be CET +1. So as a difference from corporate headquarter phone 2, it needs to be GMT -8. This is GMT +1, so it should be 9 hours ahead. VoIP calls to both corporate headquarter phone 2 and branch 1 phone 1 use G729. G711 over to branch 2 phone 2. By the way, that corporate headquarter phone 1 just booted up, and then it's now resetting again because device mobility mode found the subnet it was on, and it's now resetting with the new parameters that it was given. Multicast media on hold, or multicast music on hold, needs to still work. Branch 2 were to lose connectivity, there should be SRST to that router. All calls that Jack attempts to make should only go out the branch 2 gateway primarily, except 911 calls should only go out the corporate headquarter gateway. Now wait a minute. What do you mean should go out the branch 2 gateway primarily? I thought you said that the CSS doesn't get passed. Go back and look at the device pool. Open that in a new window. For branch 2 phones, pull up our phone here. Well, it's still, device is in a, it's already gone. Whole device is in a roaming location. On from the bottom, I was too slow. Be able to pull it up. I can do settings, 2 network, 1 for IPv4, and we can see that we are at 177.3.11.55. So back to what we were saying, I thought you said, Mark, that device mobility calling search space would not be updated. Well, that's correct. If we are between device mobility groups or between countries, then none of this information is passed. If that's the case, then how can we possibly make the call go out the branch 2 gateway? However, 911 calls go out the corporate headquarter gateway, even if this isn't totally the desired functionality. In other words, in real life, you wouldn't want 911 calls really to still work, but within 7.0.0, there's no way that we could really handle that. Within 7.01, we could handle it with geolocation routing. We could block it. But in 7.0.0, there's no way to stop those 911 calls from still going out the roaming device mobility roaming phone's home gateway. So Jack's dialing habits, wait a minute. Jack's dialing habits should not have to change. 911 calls go out the home gateway, but the rest of the calls go out the branch 2 gateway. So if Jack dials internationally to reach PSTN phones that happen to be at the branch 2 country code and geographic area code, such as 9/011/31/20/703/7333, he should still be able to do so? But it goes out the branch 2 gateway? Okay, well, let's see how that's going to work. AAR does not need to function properly. Ensure calls made into Jack's phone display exactly as they would as if he were back at the corporate headquarters site. All right, so let's try some basic things first. First of all, let's call back to 1002. Just so this displays a lot faster, I'm not going to pull up remote phone for both phone displays. So instead I have G729, my stats, my stream, refresh, show that I am 177.3.11 to 177.1.11. So those are phone-to-phone G729. What about if I were to call to branch 1, 2001? Okay, let's update this refresh. So now I'm 177.3.11 myself to 2.11, codec G729. All right, so that's good. And what about calls to oops, 3002. So now I'm calling on local subnet here. Let's refresh this stream. 177.311 to 311, and it looks like it's G729. Okay. Take a look and see why that might be. Listen, let's take a look at his time as well. So let me go ahead and end this call. The time shows 1957, and the corporate headquarter phone 2 shows 1057. Basically 11 o'clock, and this is basically 8 o'clock, so that is exactly 9 hours ahead of the corporate headquarter phone. So the time is right, the date is proper. Take a look at our settings. Here I've got region branch 2. So now my corporate headquarter phone 1 shows up as 177.311. In fact, let's just go take a look at our switch 2 over here. Show CDP neighbor on branch 1. We note that Bravo Alpha Alpha Echo, which is the branch 1 phone 1, last 4 of the MAC, is back there. Okay. Show here on branch 2 shows, what was it, Alpha 576. There we go, Alpha 576 is the visiting MAC address. So we are properly over on branch 2 gateway. Branch 2 DHCP handed out the IP to Alpha 576, 177.3.11.55. Looks like it did. That's good. Clear that off. So here's our branch 2 phone 2 is using the device pool for branch 2 phones. That has region branch 2. So let's go take a look at that region. And for some reason region branch 2 is told to use G728. So let's just change that. 711, or I suppose 722 if it got negotiated properly. And let's do a restart. Restarting branch 2 phone 2. Here it's finally resetting corporate headquarter phone 1. Phone. Device and roaming location. Let's try that call again. Over to 3002. And do a refresh. Here we've got 177.311, 177.311, and we're actually using the G722 protocol because it's equal in bandwidth to 711, and in this particular lab has not been disabled. Okay, so it was doing exactly what we told it to. It was just that we happen to have the region set to something different. All right, so we're good there. So we've already ensured G729 back to the other 2. Let's do multicast music on hold. So let's just call back over to 3002. Him put me on hold. Okay. Let's do a refresh. And it's from 239.111, which to me looks like that's 711. There's no transmit codec. That's the last transmit codec, but the receive is 711. Sender codec, we're not sending any packets, 0 packets. So it says 22, but that's just because that was the last stream. So it's from the publisher, and it's G711 because, well, if we take a look at branch 2 and the music on hold servers, we have 711. So why ever it was configured like this from our, previous modules, don't really remember exactly why we had it configured like that. Maybe we were looking at streaming from the branch router, but the point is that it's doing, exactly what we told it to do. Exactly how it's configured for branch 2 site. And 239.111, we know that we're listening to a multicast stream. But of course, go over to the branch 2 router, do a show IPM route, and at 239.111 is going out fast 00.11 and serial 001 colon 0.1. So this is back across the WAN as the incoming, and the outgoing is the voice VLAN over to switch 2. If I end that call, if I do show command again, still going out. It will probably die off here in a little bit. There we go. Now it's coming in the serial because it's being flooded dense mode, but there is no outgoing interface list because no one is requesting that file any longer. Or that. Okay, so let's make sure our gateways are cleared off and that they all have debug ISDN Q931 so that we can see how calls are going to flow. Now we'll do the SRST last again. So all calls should go out the branch 2 gateway, but 911 should go out corporate headquarter gateway, even if that wouldn't really be what we'd want in real life. Let's try this. Let's try 911 first. Okay? Let me hide this stream information. Bring this up here. And let's try having Jack call 911. Refreshing very fast. There we go, 911. And going out the corporate headquarter gateway, Jack Shepard. Okay. Well, that one worked. And that makes sense because we didn't take our CSS with us. So in other words, now remember, we had the calling search space of the branch 1 device pool last because that was the last site that we had visited. But now we just got on a plane from Austin and flew over to Amsterdam, and we are back to using our corporate headquarter device pool CSS. Our existing device CSS if we have one configured on the device, and we do. So that gateway was clearly used for the 911 call. Let's clear off that buffer, and let's now make a call to, let's say, a local number, 9206. That call is not connected. I know that certain, but it still shows connected. Okay, we're back with that, and here's Jack's phone. So we're going to call the first line here, 206.501.5111. So Jack will go off hook. Now remember, if Jack had, if he had, and let's just go take a look at the configuration just to be sure. If Jack had inherited the branch 2 phones, device mobility, calling search space, which is CSS dial device branch 2 PSTN, let's just go take a look at that. Calling search space, oops. 2. Okay, here's the device, dial device branch 2 PSTN. This contains the dial device branch 2 only PSTN partition, the Netherlands partition, internal DNs, and the directory. So if we take a look at translation patterns that begin with 9, none of them are in the partition dial device Netherlands or branch 2 only. What about the ones that start with 0? Sure, we've got partition dial device Netherlands PSTN and we also, if we go to our actual route patterns, got branch 2 only, which is 0, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 1, 2. So going back to our translation patterns, basically, if we want to look at partitions that contain NL, they either start with a 0. Here's a 0, 0, so this is 0, 0 for national dialing. We have 000 for international. First 0 is the secondary dial tone. And then we have 0 and 7 digits for local. Or we've got /+ or /+ 3120. There's nothing that begins with 9. So if Jack had inherited that calling search space, which we are pretty sure that he didn't because of the 911, then he would only be able to dial digits that begin with 0 for PSTN. And he would not be able to dial anything. In fact, let's just be certain here real quick again. Route plan report where anything begins with a 9. Does anything in here have a partition that has a NL or a NL or a branch 2? Nothing. Nothing that begins with a 0. Or sorry, nothing that begins with a 9 that has a NL. Okay, so he shouldn't be able to dial 9 if he has his own proper, if he had the new calling search space, but he has his own home calling search space, so he should be able to dial a 9. And do this real quick, so we'll go off hook. Jack will dial 9, and let's say 206, 501, 5111. So Jack is dialing normal, but it got transformed to 00, which is international, 001, 206, 501, 5111 in this call, and it went out the branch 2 gateway. So router 1, corporate headquarters, nope. Router 2, branch 1, nope. Router 3, branch 2 is where it went out. Jack Shepard shows up with his country code first. So how did this happen? Well, it happened exactly as we told you. All calls that he attempts should go out the branch 2 gateway primarily. This is because, back to the device pool for branch 2 phones that he inherited some of the information about, he did not inherit any of these parameters. However, he did, even though it doesn't show up in roaming sensitive settings category or subcategory, he did inherit local route group. In fact, if I were to advise Cisco to kind of redesign this, just this one page, I would say put physical location and device mobility group up in device pool settings, because that doesn't get inherited. That's just how we make distinctions between device mobility related settings. And then put local route group down in the roaming sensitive settings, because this is the area that all of this, well, except for the last two, always gets passed. As long as we're between physical locations, we always get this information here. If we are between physical locations, always take this information. Okay, but if we are between, and I actually should have set up there, between physical locations, rather within device mobility group or within the country, then and only then we will take everything. So we did still take the local route group, and that's why the call's going out the local gateway. So if we did take the local route group, then let's follow the path of what happened. We already know what calling search space we have. We already know what we dialed because we dialed it. We dialed a pattern that began with a 9 and had 10 digits, so this is the only pattern that we could have taken. It dropped the 9. Okay, if we take a look at called party transformation, we drop pre-dot, we prefix a +1, so this is now a globalized number, +1, and we dialed 206-501-5111, and it sends it on to be matched by the digit analysis engine again in any partitions in the CSS, translation pattern to route pattern, SLRG, PSTN CSS. Well, the only one in there is the partition of the same name, translation pattern. There's no other translation patterns that could cause a reoccurring or cyclical routing loop. So how about partition contains this information here in route pattern? We only have one, so it matches this. This sends it off to SLRG. SLRG goes to the local gateway. So the local gateway is branch 2. MGCP gateway. So we'll go down here to the branch 2 MGCP gateway. And what happens? The called party transformation CSS is searched for a match for +1 206 501 5111, the PSTN number. So let's go look at this called party transformation with a partition of the same name. Really looking at partition contains 2. Really, that CSS has the branch 2 partition, but then also .nl. So partition contains either NL, or let's add condition. Partition contains gateway. Now it's not liking that. For some reason, it doesn't like any of my filters. Might just be a bug with. But we can see if I just sort these partitions. Here I've got my L's, 3 of them, and then here's my 1 branch 2 gateway right here. So it's not +3-1. It's not +3-1 here. It's not +1-1-2. It is +1, but it's +1 206. So it only matches this called party transformation pattern right here, which says to strip the pre-dot and prefix a 00. Because of that, the call goes out the local gateway because we already had everything set up from globalization and localization way back in module 10. It goes out the local gateway routed properly. So we still, because of globalization and localization, combined with device mobility, we still save WAN bandwidth, not using our home gateway except for patterns that only match and route out there, which is our emergency services patterns. But the number is transformed, and therefore the carrier routes it in the proper fashion. Now, maybe we wanted it to go out the corporate headquarter gateway. That's going to get back into tail-end hop-off. So we've got a task with that coming up. But for right now, it is doing what we want. Let's try dialing internationally from the phone. Let's try going off hook on Jack's phone and dialing 9-011-31-20-703-7333. And just so I don't have to wait for an interdigit timeout, I'll hit the hash. Notice it's coming from the international number of 1-206-501-1001 going out the branch 2 gateway as a local call. Call was actually sent out as a local call. Again, it's the same exact thing. Standard local route group is what routed it, and then the called party transformation matched this as the best match. +1, when the call went out, our translation patterns globalized it to +31. +3120 matches. We drop pre-dot. There's only 7 digits left. We send it out as subscriber. The call went out as called party subscriber local with 7 digits. Globalization and localization once again save the day. All right, so we've met that. AAR does not need to function properly, and it's not going to. Okay, and the reason is, again, if we go to device pool, branch 2, we're not taking on a new AAR group or CSS, and so it's now we're actually using the same CSS anyway, but AAR is not going to function necessarily properly, especially because of the fact that we have our own primary local gateway. Okay, so AAR might function in some instances. There are limitations. It does not have to function properly when you're roaming to another country. And the SRND tells us this, by the way. Okay, ensure that calls made into Jack's phone display as if he were at the corporate headquarters site. So let's bring up this in the PSTN phone, and let's dial in from this phone, so 206-501-1001. This actually is showing up with 001206. So why is this showing up with the same way that he would see it if he were actually at the branch 2 site? Okay, again, this gets back to the phone. We told the phone, corporate headquarter phone 1, to use device pool. So it does have a new device pool, and it's basically saying this is my new device pool, period. Now these aren't overriding what is on his phone. However, so he can still dial his same fashion. You know, he still dials with his 9 for secondary dial tone and dials as if he was in the US. However, the calling party transformation, it was told to use from the device pool, and this is set to something else. So if you wanted to travel internationally, we didn't want it to show up in the same way that the other international sites were showing up, then we'd either create a whole separate device pool for him that we'd put on physical location and DMG, you know, Netherlands, and we'd associate that subnet for branch 2 to the new device pool that was just for him while he was traveling, and have his own corporate headquarter phone 1. We could do that. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Branch 2 phones, actually call it branch 2 corporate headquarter phone device mobility, and set this to calling party for corporate, where is it, headquarter phones. Save. Successful, 0 members currently. Okay, so we've got this new device pool. How do we associate the phone to it? With device mobility info for branch 2 phones. We're going to associate this. And actually, let's just leave it to the branch 2 phones as well. That's fine. Okay, the phone is already resetting. Meantime, the only other thing we have to do is check SRST. As long as SRST is set up properly, then it is going to fall back, just as we told it to properly at branch 1. All we do have to do is shut down the serial interface to the branch 2 corporate headquarter to branch 2 WAN link. Phone's still restarting. Now it's resetting again. Reason, came back up, found device mobility on, found a new subnet, found a new device pool that it's registered to, got the new settings, including calling party, the new calling party transformation CSS, and now it's resetting with those parameters to have those parameters take effect. Now, if this were the real lab, so that you're not bored just watching this happen, if this were the real lab, you would not be sitting here doing what I'm doing, which is talking or just waiting for this phone to come back up. Maybe you had written down some questions for the proctor. Now would be a great time to go ask him or her. Or maybe you had, something else to do, but find something else to do. Don't just sit here during times of restarts and things like that and wait. Here we go, device and roaming location, and just wait for your update, restart, whatever to take effect. All right, so let's dial back in. Now the call's coming in how we would expect it to, 206. If I had called that same number from an international line, even though I'm at the branch 2 site, now the call's coming in according to my calling party transformation CSS 01131, how I'm used to seeing it presented. However, let's just make sure that I still have the proper, let's go ahead and kill all of our scroll back buffers on all of our sites. Try dialing out from the phone. Let's dial, go off hook and dial 9. #011 3120 703 7333 hash. So it's still going out local gateway, being formatted as a local call. Display updates and shows that. It's still functioning as we would expect it to with the new device pool that we just created. However, we created it specifically so that we could have only our traditional, what we're used to as our calling party transformation CSS. Really looked at device mobility and broken it down, I think, as far as we can. Again, there's really not that much in terms of difficulty. It's mainly conceptual. Once you get over the concept and you have that nailed, got that down, then the actual configuration for it, there really isn't a lot there to have to do.